Justin. I think we have everybody in the room is being if we don't have any first-time visitors that I can see. I did see Alex Martin's in the corner there. For those who don't know Alex, he's one of the candidates in the runoff from the first district. So I'm glad to see him in Alex. So he's not the only new person I've seen here. Well, maybe for Alex's benefit, why don't we just go around the room and that way you can see who's the cast of characters you may have to deal with after you why don't you start with you, Yvonne?
Michelle Lassen, attorney's office. Jason McHenry, district attorney. Electoral Gonzalez, victim witness.
Larry Millar, public works.
Julie Dustamani, county clerk recorder. Regina Schaff, administration.
Aaron Elbaugh, board of supervisors. Craig Hemphill, life department.
John Cody, child support.
Dan Schleter, assessment.
Chris Cole, JDX. Dean Groton, Sheriff.
Kevin Jones, Captain Sheriff's Office.
Jen Bailey, probation. Brooke Suarez, planning and building. Jeff Valdez, probation. Christina Devine, treasurer and tax collector. Nancy Cardino, Lassen County treasurer and tax collector. Julie Morgan, admin. Diana Wemple, auditor.
Jim Chapman, supervisor.
Richard Egan, county administrative officer.
Okay.
I hope this got a test.
Yes, now you need to go around the room.
You'll have 4 years to pass the test. Okay, so let's move on to public comment. Do we have any public comment to be offered? Okay. Approve the minutes of the last meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion by Aaron. I'll second it. Any comment or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. We move on to our main item, budget, and this is the opportunity for Richard and Julie to present their recommended budget update.
Okay, so let me just start off by saying I think we're going to schedule an additional meeting next week, mainly because I had hoped to get my recommendations out to the departments in advance of this meeting to provide time to look at those and have comments on those. And Julie wasn't able to get it done until just a few minutes ago, so that's what she's going to be handing out with those changes that we made to that over the last couple of weeks. So I think we'll schedule for next Tuesday the 30th at some time, and we can talk about that later on.
As we do, I just happened to flash in my mind. I know the JPA for the pool, Inlet Valley Recreation Authority, we're planning a budget workshop that day to work on the pool budget. So we need to verify with Jared what time frame is, so our meeting won't overlap with that, or they can be back to back.
So anyway, with that, I think we have later on the agenda item to discuss our next meeting, so we can do that then, and maybe in the meantime we can figure that out. Julie's got some summaries that I think she's going to hand out. Julie and
we have some comments.
So Julie and Diane and I spent some more time going over individual expenditure budget units and revenues, made several minor changes, almost exclusively reductions to the budgets, and the way we did that is by looking at the trends of the actual expenditures over the last couple of years. They appeared to be to exceed the trend line there. We reduced a lot of service and supply line items, travel, training, various service and supply items at all the units. Still resulted in a wide gap between revenues and expenditures, which isn't a surprise to anyone, particularly with the inclusion of a lot of the reclassification requests that we recommend to the board. There are also several new positions that were requested in the budget, and Julie's got a summary of those as well that I think she's going to hand out. These are, as she's handed out, are currently included in the draft recommendation, but that likely will change before we get to the final recommended budget. In essence, what we did in order to mathematically balance the fund summary that you have there is to take transfers from the general fund to public safety and from general reserve to the general fund in order to result in zero balances in those funds projected at the end of the year. The transfers indicated roughly a $1 million increase in the general fund support of public safety from last year's budget to this year's budget. And that, that's simply a fund transfer, so that would be spread over all the budget units that are included in public safety. Thank you, Mel. Nice to see you. Mel came up with a very good solution to what has historically been a very troubled fund, the 112 fund. I want to talk a little bit about that, unless you'd like to address it. Okay, so as we all know, the 112 fund, the Economic Development Fund, has historically been a deficit operation for a whole variety of reasons, but largely a lot of activities that go on there are not reimbursed by the grants that they're trying to get, is the nature of the business. And so that's resulted over time in a large deficit in that budget, which 2 years ago I asked Mel to try to figure out a way to resolve that and at least get the trend going in the right direction and eventually bring that fund up to a zero balance. So the solution that we've come up with is to utilize an interest revenue there's an interest accrues on Health and Human Service funds like it does almost all the other funds on the 110, 120, and 121 funds. And that revenue is discretionary, at least in our view. It doesn't have to be used for those funds purposes. It can be transferred to the general fund or other uses. And so the thought here is that we'll take that interest and transfer it into the 112 fund to essentially subsidize those activities in the 112 fund, and as a lump sum transfer, bring that fund up to a zero balance. And that's why you'll see in the 112 fund at the end of 16-17 it projects a zero balance, which will be the first time in I don't know how long. So that's a very positive improvement on that. I think over the course of the next year also, Mel and I will explore bringing that function totally out of doing away with the 112 fund and probably never using the number 112 for any kind of fund ever again, if we can do that. But bringing the activity of economic development
in the discussions with the board over the last couple, 2-3 years, the idea of just phasing out, eliminating that whole function because of the nature, the board is pretty much wants it gone.
Well, that's agreed. There are certain functions that have been done in there that have some value, like helping the other local districts, like CSB and Spalding, and so forth, get CDB.
But transfer those into an administrative unit that can still take care of that part of it, but not have this fund that has been, from the get-go hasn't been a good match.
And so that's the thought moving forward, is that we'll do away with the 112.
There's $135,000 worth of interest.
And the way we're doing this, I'm glad you asked that, is we have calculated going backwards 3 years. Is that right? No,
I'm going to go back over to 0809.
Oh, you did? Okay, a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
So we went back and calculated that money that has been transferred into that fund over that period of time, which is not wasn't needed for those purposes and is discretionary money, and transfer that into the 112 fund. And what was the total we loaned?
From 0809, we had earned about $253,000 in interest, and 110, 120, 121.
and we're going to end up transferring a little less than 230,000 in 112 to bring, because they ended up 15, 16 in the red also, so we had to cover that, plus some budgetary issues in 16, 17. So between all of that, it's going to make it even.
So it's about 230,000.
Yeah, about 230,000 is what they needed to end up getting out of the red by the end of 16, 17.
And those funds, the 110, 120, 121, those funds total over $10 million. So there's quite a bit of interest that accrues in a normal interest rate environment.
Yeah, we had some lean years where we didn't earn a lot of interest just because the interest rate was so low. Yeah.
And I like the approach of continuing to use that interest to fund this activity.
And we have some other revenue generating activities fiscal year, because we can't count on that level of interest being there every year, that's for sure. So.
Right. Any questions about that? So that's the one.
Well, thank you, Mel, for a solution to a problem that's plagued everybody for a long time.
Well, in health and social services, we don't see it as a problem. So we just have to figure out how to fund it.
Well, the problem isn't the agency. The problem is trying to make it work right so it can stay in a proper funded kind of a capacity, because it's always been basically historically underfunded. I mean, by the nature of the structure. It was structurally designed to be that way, and that was never, I don't think, acceptable to the board. I mean, the board has asked, I don't know how many administrations now try to come up with a solution to that problem, and you solved it, so that's kudos to you.
Maybe.
On paper for now, accept that.
For this coming year, we're good.
A year from now, I won't have to worry about it.
Moving on, another key adjustment that we made to the budget is the inclusion of a vacancy factor in the three major funds, the general fund, public safety, and probation. And Julie, if you could just describe each one of those funds, because we're treating them a little bit differently in terms of the amount of the vacancy factor.
We're doing 4% in the general fund, 6.5% in public safety, and 9% in probation.
And in terms of relativity, last year we experienced a real vacancy savings in the general fund of roughly 8%. In public safety, Julie helped me with 12.
I have it on my desk.
I think it was in the 12, it was 13%. And then probation was huge, it was like 24.5%. So those aren't guaranteed savings, but based on history, they seem pretty realistic. And actually probably a little conservative. So those have been included, not by budget unit, but by fund. And so you'll see at the bottom of each fund the inclusion of those vacancy factors. What those do require, though, is we'll have to monitor that, and if at mid-year it looks like we're not experiencing the vacancy that we projected, we'll have to address that issue. In at least recent history, we've exceeded the factor that we put in, so I'm fairly comfortable with that. So the big elephant in the room, obviously, is the dipping into the general reserve in order to fund the transfers to public safety and the operation of the general fund, and so that amount totals 1 point. Is that 1.8? If that calculation is correct, it would be 1.8 million.
That includes the 200,000 contingency.
Right,
So
which is
1.6.
as it should. There's included in that number the $200,000 contingency, which would be in the general reserve. But 1.6 transferred from reserves to general fund and eventually public safety and other funds to support those funds. Naturally, that's a lot higher than I think any of us would like to see. I think if we adopt a budget like this, we're going to have to look during this current fiscal year to try to figure out a way to reduce expenditures in maybe a more thoughtful method for next fiscal year. I think we can support it for this year by doing this, but obviously that's not sustainable, and we need to address that issue. So there you have it. I don't know, Julie, if you had any other comments about that.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments from various departments that are here?
I do have a question. For the general fund department, is there something we can see for it easily to the public departments? Because right now, it's just all lumped under general fund.
Yeah, what you have is a summary, and you're welcome to come and look through this with Julie, or even we can print one out. Or
We should
maybe,
be able to get it on the intranet too.
okay. And when do you think we could do that?
You already copied over, right? I saw PDFs and read it, maybe we can do it.
No, that was last year.
As soon as we're ready.
Yeah, I mean, it'll take 2 seconds.
Okay.
And then I'll just
Later
I'll
today or
send out an
tomorrow.
email.
Could you get a copy for Aaron and I to have?
Hard copy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause we don't have the internet, so.
So, okay, so are we okay on that? Maybe we'll go through, just because I think the new positions are what will probably be the topic of discussion, perhaps at the board level, for the board members that aren't involved in
And for
this.
those who kind of want, we had a couple people wandering a little bit late. Today is basically Richard and Julie, and they're putting on the table what they are recommending for the budget consideration as a final one. The departmental budgets will be available to all the various departments and look to see, like in case Latoya, you had the question, did that revenue get in there, to look for anything that might be missing or changes that you have. And then we're going to hopefully have then a meeting on the 30th to come back to, hammer out, what they, so this is kind of like basically give you a week to be able to study to see, so whatever sort of pushback or change you want to make, you'll have a week to do that, and then that will be based on what would be acted on the 30th. That will become the budget that will get published, so we have a 10-day public notice process, and then the board will be presented all this for their meeting on the 13th of September for consideration of final adoption. It could be adopted that day, or the board can continue.
So, okay, if we could go into the new position requests that I've included in the draft recommendation, and that's what Julie's got a stack on that, if everybody's got it. And we'll just go down the line. So collections has through the treasurer's office has requested a 1 FTE account clerk technician. This represents a new position in technicality, but in reality, this function's been done through extra help for a couple of years or several years, and so because of the difficulty with retired annuitants and so forth, they've asked to convert that extra help into a range 9 account clerk position. I believe it's roughly offsetting the function that they've been doing with the extra help retired annuitants, so that's why we've included that. And Nancy may have some other comments about that, but it provides kind of a minimal level of staffing for collections to be able to have coverage during the day when they're in satellite offices and courthouse and stuff. Why don't we go through them? If we have questions, we can talk about each individual one. Assessor's office, Dan's here today. Assessor has asked for a position that was reduced back 5, 6, 7 years ago.
09, I think.
Yes, and an assistant appraiser position. The department's been operating without the assistant appraiser position for that period of time. So this year's a little bit unique in that they're anticipating losing some real key staff, and the need remains there to keep up on their appraisals to have an assistant appraiser. So I've been persuaded that that's a necessary position, and so I've left that in there.
Me, to get too far along. One thing.
Okay. Moving on, in Public Works, Roads, and Transportation, there's a one FTE position that to be allocated as shown there across those funds and budgets. So that's a position that, at least the intention from my perspective, is to have somebody in that position to free up the boots on the grounds kind of people and others to actually get out and get more projects done.
And only a quarter of that comes out of the general fund, the other 3/4 are coming from either the road or transportation.
Correct.
Yeah. And I think that's important to note too.
Correct. Any questions on that one? Ag Commissioner. So the Ag Commissioner, which we have one today. Congratulations, Craig.
I didn't know that that much. Maybe we should have drug our feet for another couple of years, you know?
As you all know, we've been operating without an Ag Commissioner, with a contract Ag Commissioner, and with an emergency appointed Ag Commissioner over the last 3 years, some different combination. And now that we have a full-time Ag Commissioner, we won't need those special departmental requests or special departmental expenditures for contracts with other counties to hire an Ag Commissioner to sign a few documents here and there.
Well, this actually will be a cheaper option.
It'll be offset by a reduction in expenditures in addition to the Chief Deputy Ag Commissioner position will certainly be vacant for a little while. With Craig assuming the Ag Commissioner.
Is that general fund or is that general fund?
Did you put those savings for?
Those savings are included in the recommended budget, the reductions in cost for the contract.
Especially the contract with Mona.
And the Deputy Ag Commissioner?
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay. Code enforcement. So this is a brand new position, code enforcement officer. As you all know, we've experienced a huge increase in demand for a code enforcement officer with the marijuana program.
So this is the marijuana cop?
Well, this would be classified as a code enforcement officer not specific to marijuana because the department will decide how to allocate those resources. Right now, the director of the department is doing most of the code enforcement activity, but this individual, I'm sure, will be heavily involved in the marijuana code enforcement if we continue that effort in the same vigor that we have been. Victim witness, we've got a 7/10 of an increase in the victim witness program, and I'm drawing a little bit of a blank here if that's actually a new.
This is grant funded.
I think this is a transfer between budget units.
No, this is all grant funded.
Yeah.
108 is 100% grant funded. And so the .2 is moving our .8 advocate to a full-time, and then looking to hire another half-time advocate to go out to outlying areas.
Okay. And those dollar amounts, Julie, we projected a portion of the year.
The .2 is just the cost for the 2/10 increase, and the halftime, that's the total cost.
For a full year?
The 25,000 is, yes, half for a full year.
All right.
So some of these numbers, even, I think you need to look at the budget from a full year
Yes.
perspective, even though it's only going to be filled for half or 3/4 of the year because of the, we're already going to be a quarter into the.
And that's a grant funded position. Not general. Health and Social Service admin, adding a program manager and half of an account technician. These, you want to?
Program manager was for the contracts, correct?
Yes.
So, as the board experienced recently, we have a whole bunch of contracts, and with the amount of federal and state money we're getting into our contracts, it's becoming more and more critical that we have someone to manage all the federal and state overlays on those contracts. And so we need a manager to kind of conduct audits and to manage the whole what's in the contract so that we get all the language correct, so that when the state and the feds need to do a audit with the past.
Have we had much problem with not being in compliance with those federal or state audits? Is that
Not yet, but MHSA is coming around, is beginning to come around to counties and take a look at their contracts, and it's only a matter of time before we get into the federal audit and social services. So.
how about those the MAW funds? Is this would be involved with the MAW funding as well?
You know what?
Because that's one that requires crossing T's and dotting I's.
Yes, that
So
is another one we would look at.
that would be part of this position. Okay.
Yeah, oh, just generally making sure all of our contracts that have any state and federal money, well, even our county contracts, although I can't think of any right offhand, they're all county, but that all of them meet those federal and state requirements, which are just becoming more and more onerous.
Are you still using that guy from Plymouth County with the MAW that helps you guys?
Taking the economic development housing budget, and we need help with MAW in health and social services fiscal. Because basically Sue and I took on the MAW program on top of everything else we already do, so we need a little help. So that person is going to go to full time as soon as the budget's approved and help us with MAW on top of working Janice programs.
So the program manager would be funded through HSS distribution and the account technical from law.
Yeah, but still through HSS. But we
Yeah.
actually are bringing in quite a bit of MAW revenue in the HSS budget, so it'll pay for itself.
All right. Moving on into mental health.
The admin assistant, staff analyst, we may not do that if we're looking at the other plan we discussed the other day. We can't add that many new positions to that budget, so I'm comfortable if you want to take that one off.
And that's a non-general fund.
Yes,
So
it
it's
would be a mental health
more
plan.
impact to the general fund contribution. Maybe we'll take that out, Julie.
Okay.
Behavioral health case manager.
So those are actually case managers in the wraparound program. They're facilitators. And for every case, for every child, youth that's placed with their own family that we provide wraparound services to, we can claim assistance funds to support the wraparound program. So those two positions will also be self-supporting or with assistance. Assistance funds, sorry.
Okay. Child Protective Services. This is you, no?
Yeah,
I'm
so
calling
we
for-
just, Eric requested us to unfreeze the social worker 4 position that we
Yes,
froze
that was
years
in the
ago.
budget. I'm sorry, Julie asked me a question, I was pointing to you. Sorry, Yvonne.
It was a soft frozen position that we froze back when about 2008 or 9, I think, when things turned real bad. And the state has finally paid all the counties for the child welfare services money that they've owed us for years. So now we want to unfreeze that position.
And we're interested, there are a lot of changes going on in child welfare, in particular the new resource family approval process. The new SIPs are coming out. And we're still contracting with the state to do our adoption services. And we don't think they do a very good job, and Social Worker 4 would help us take that back to the state and do it ourselves.
Well, do we pay the state really?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we are paying them now.
Or we
Yeah, that's
I'm
what-
fine with that.
Yes, some savings. We don't pay them as much as their cost is, but, and then it's state funded anyway. State and federal funded.
Okay. So, next, local transportation, the Transportation Commission acted earlier this year to reorganize their management somewhat, to add a executive director position to that. That's a
separate independent.
separate entity from the county, but they're budgeted through the county, and there is fiscal impact to the county because we're a 50% partner in that organization, and so there will be fiscal impact to that, but not general fund.
It comes out of the transportation fund, yeah.
So there's that. Public defender, I didn't see the public defender requested an additional attorney in their office in response to there being more resources in the district attorney's office. The public defender now finds that they need more resources to defend the prosecution. So that's, I'm not sure that the data, actually supports the increase in the workload, but we don't have any real clear numbers to show that.
How many public defenders do we have now?
3 and 2 deputies.
So
There's three attorneys in the public defenders.
Okay, how many attorneys do we have in the DA's office?
5.
If I may though, I think it's important to keep in mind that the public defender does not receive cases from law enforcement. They do not review cases. We receive and review cases from each law enforcement agency to file them. Public defender gets a very small percentage of cases. A lot of the cases are sent out to conflict counsel. So public defender does not handle the same caseload that we do. I think it may be a third, I think might be being very generous to say that they handle a third of the same caseload that we handle. Additionally, our office is we're in the process of, this is something new, so it hasn't, I don't know exactly what the fiscal impact is going to be, but it's actually going to reduce the public defender's caseload because we're in the process of signing a contract with an agency by the name of Corrective Solutions, and that is going to allow, it's called a Community Accountability Program, and it will effectively remove from the system certain very low-level offenses. We're doing this in response to Proposition 47 and 11, the realignment. My office finds itself in a position to have to adjust our manner of prosecution. So essentially what we're going to be doing is offering what is a low-level pre-filing diversion program to people who have simple cases like driver's license cases that the public defender is currently getting appointed on. And the county is having to pay the public defender to basically walk somebody through the process of getting their driver's license back. And we don't feel like that is very cost effective. This will save money for the courts, it will save money for our office, and it will save the public defender, it will decrease their caseload as well. So if you want my opinion is that the public defender doesn't need an additional attorney, that we are working to resolve the issue. We had an increase in crime levels because of Proposition 47. Having said that, I think that does add somewhat to their caseload, but not very much, especially because we're trying to get this other program into place, and we should have it within the next few months. That will basically take these cases out of the system. It's going to take a number of cases out of the system, but it's brand new, so I can't give you an exact figure. And we've never been able to run reports before on exactly what our crime statistics are, because we just recently got that brand new program that will actually allow us to run statistics. We've not been able to do that before, so hopefully in coming years we will be able to give everyone statistics on exactly what our office is doing.
And that being the case, I may change my recommendation to delay implementing a new position in the public defender's office until these things.
And if you need more information, you're free to contact me about it. I know I haven't brought it up before because it's very, very new. We just signed the contract, so it should be implemented within the next couple of months, but there are some bugs to work out in the meantime.
Do board members have any position on that?
Sounds like it's worth pointing out. I think both, whether it's in this department or in the DA's department, I think it needs to be driven by the members in the caseload. And we hear the rhetoric that says, oh, we have this and we have that, and we're overwhelmed and we're understaffed, and this one's sick and that one's gone.
Oh, we're still...
Yeah, I know. I mean, we hear all that, but the bottom line comes down to is what the numbers in terms of the output. And the proof is in the pudding. So, I mean, I know not only just these two departments, but that's true for the workload and the board is... You don't have any workload, do you, Sheriff?
No. So what we're wanting to do here, we have a current it's a funded sheriff sergeant position that historically has helped with administrative duties, CCW permits, and all kinds of stuff, and covering patrol shifts. But we have a greater need in other areas right now. So what I want to do is unfund that sergeant, make another deputy sheriff position. It will be, once we're able to fill it, we have a number of vacancies right now, but once we're able to fill it as a deputy who will be assigned as a detective, just to help with the workload on complicated investigations and even the marijuana stuff. A lot of times it's our detectives who are the only people we have available to fill out and help. In addition to that, we want to create a community services officer. Right now we have a number of neighborhood watch programs. We're rebuilding the search and rescue programs. We have volunteers who are staffing, at least right now, the Doyle substation, and we intend to expand that if we have volunteers available, but we need someone to coordinate all that. So that person really is going to primarily be a volunteer coordinator. They're going to be a community service officer, will still help with public events and so on, but their main responsibility will be coordinating those volunteers. And we do have 3 volunteers right now who come into the sheriff's office on a regular basis and help out with public record act requests, whatever else it might be to help with all kinds of duties. So we just need someone to be there and help support those programs, recruit volunteers and so on. And then the next,
just as a point of clarification on that, it shows 0.00 deputy. That should be a 1.0.
Should be, well, maybe it's just the one, that's what I was talking about. I just need to know which one increased, because their total FTEs only went up 1. Because they're changing the sergeant to the deputy, right? So maybe I'll just...
unfunding the sergeant spot. We don't want to do away with the spot. We're just going to fund it. So later down the road, we find, correct?
yeah, we decided, the hard part is that there is a gap there created by the lack of that sergeant. But down the road, if we need to change, I want some record that it existed at some point in case we have to approach the board.
So you're turning one off and creating a new one in its place?
Yes.
And then the classification will remain.
So then it's...
so there's only a net of 1 increase of 1 position.
Right.
So would one active position, but 2 new.
Well, but if that's the case, then if you're defunding or you're declassifying like the...
We're saving money because it's a sergeant and deputy also.
Okay, so that in terms of dollar amount, it would only be, you're only talking about the savings in terms of the differential between sergeant to deputy and then adding a community service thing. So you're not adding this here because it's showing funding being added. You have two positions being added, and then it says unfunded sergeant, so you're not minusing the funding on there. So dollar-wise, that needs to be put in.
It's a
there.
net increase of 1 position, but not a sergeant's position.
Yeah, but I'm saying is you're adding a cost of a position here, you're adding a cost of position here.
When we shut down the CCF, actually when we were operating the CCF, we had 5 people that worked between the kitchen and laundry. We eliminated 2 of those and operating with 3. It's just been an ongoing challenge. We cut back on the hot meals to 1 a day, which isn't a huge issue, but it does cause problems. We have to do a hot meal for probation, but it also affects the inmate population and so on. But where the problem is, the 3 people we have there are trying to do everything that 5 people used to do. So that's why we're asking for that one. We talked with Richard and budgeted it for 6 months. Still going through a new program, trying to look at different vendors for options for food. Maybe doing one large contract from an organization that would supply all the food. Some other things that might save us some time too. And on the next one is actually that one. It's a fleet maintenance, but it's a new classification. It's going to be a civilian now rather than a correctional officer. So it was a correctional supervisor. So that's it's similar to what Jim was talking about on the other one. So this one is actually overall going to be a cost savings. We're going from a correctional supervisor at a 17 safety with 3 at 50 to a 16/18 civilian with
2.5 at 6 feet.
Yeah. So in that one, it's just we're really just changing the classification from a correctional. It used to be a correctional supervisor because we had inmates who were in custody working in the motor pool on cars. Now it's people that are out on alternative to custody programs in the community and they come into work. So we don't need a correctional. Right now we really need an auto technician rather than a correctional officer. So. Oh, and then the next one. The next one's grant funded. That's for that life skills program funded by the Burn JAG grant. As that program's developed, there is money available for another full-time person in our office to help with those programs out in the community. So that one is grant funded.
Thank you.
Lee, I got a question for you. Just, you go up here to the building inspector, the code enforcement officer, they really can't go out because they don't have a badge or a gun, and they're kind of going out there. Is there some way you guys can coordinate with them and maybe blend a position and something like that? Is that something that can be done, Richard?
You're talking specifically marijuana or code enforcement in general?
Code
Because they're
enforcement in
different.
general.
Can't blend them. Sorry.
Now, in the case of marijuana, the sheriff is identified as one of the enforcement officers, but that's specific to the marijuana cultivation ordinance.
And as when part of that deputy we're talking about, what we're trying to do is create a major crimes task force. That'll give me, if I'm able to fill everything up, I'll have a sergeant. Right now I have a sergeant and a deputy. We have another deputy who's been out on injury. We're going to be returning in the near future. My goal is to have 3 deputies and a sergeant in there. Now at some point, we could give them the training related to the local ordinances, and they could take some of those steps and replace the facility and county service. The hard part right now is, it gets muddy. If they're going to go out and do that, they are going to have quite a bit of training. We're going to have to really line things out for them because we don't want to blur those lines at all. Because criminal matters have to be handled distinctly different than the code enforcement or administrative matters. So I haven't asked my guys to take those actions yet. If people are out of compliance, they'll show them what the ordinance is, give them a copy of it, try to explain it to them. But as far as the administrative enforcement side of it, there's the potential for next year. But right now we didn't want to muddy the waters yet. But that's going to be the best avenue, is take the detectives and take the investigation, have them supplementing code enforcement like they are now.
So,
and like I said, when code enforcement's not available, they can start those steps in that administrative process also.
so these numbers and position changes takes care of your needs as as a base to start with.
Yeah, I mean, our issue is still going to be the filling of positions.
Yeah.
We're always moving forward in that direction. So, but there's a big gap in investigations. Right now we have, I think, both of our people, the detective sergeant, the detective route with
The
Lori.
police chief of San Jose is looking for 89 new cops, so
Yeah, it's everywhere.
it's everywhere. Yeah, I mean, I think we get that. Okay.
The final position is a solid waste position, which is the powers authority between the city and the
And
board.
that's solid waste funding.
And it's budgeted through
And
there.
speaking of solid waste, their meeting starts in 9 minutes, and I have to be over there.
Okay, so I guess to close out the positions, if there's no questions about that, I'd like to also point out that we've incorporated into this budget almost all of the reclassification requests in one form or another. Some have been adjusted, but that's a big mouthful to bite off in one budget year, the changes that we've made, and that's part of the reason that all these budgets are increased. So we made adjustments to your positions, to a lot of your positions with your request, and I think we all need to look to holding those increased positions accountable for their increased responsibilities. And I think the board's going to be looking for that to happen.
Absolutely.
And I just want to point that out.
Okay.
That's all I have on that part of it.
So we're going to jump down because I'm going to be...
Once we get it uploaded to the internet, we can send a link.
And if the various departments find something that's out of character or wrong or erroneous or misstated or something, it will be incumbent upon those departments to get that to Julie to get sorted out before next Tuesday, because we don't want to be at the next meeting be sorting out those kind of inconsistencies or discrepancies. So it should be easy to do. With that, I think that brings us to the end of today's meeting. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you all next week.